she wrote it literally for almost 20 years. And then she got sick very, very quickly. Before she passed away from pancreatic cancer, I told her that I wanted to publish that book. I promised her I would publish it. But because she had been published by these major New York City publishers, she didn't want me to self-publish it, which would have been much easier. So I decided to take time off from my regular freelance work and learn the craft of fiction. For me, my grief was a gift because it led me to do something that I never was even on my radar screen. And now it's become something that will probably be part of my legacy. The prospect of turning 50 was not very exciting for me. It was kind of a bummer. I was feeling negative about it, and I said, no, I've got to turn this feeling around.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Broken Beautiful Me, Stories of Hope, Gratitude, and Resilience, where we gather in this sacred space for honest conversations and soul-deep healing. Today, I am so fortunate to have as a guest Margie Zable Fisher. She is the co-author, along with her late mother, of the Cabernet Club, published in January 2025. Completing and publishing the novel fulfilled a promise Margie made to her mother right before she passed away. Before becoming a full-time writer and author after age 50, Margie owned a PR agency for 20 years. Her articles have been published in the New York Times, AARP, Fortune, Next Avenue, and more. Margie is a wife and mother, loves Cabernet and the pool, and competed in her first triathlon after age 50. Woo! She plays pickleball several times a week and considers it a good day if she achieves genius status playing the New York Times spelling bee. She and her family live in Florida. Welcome, Margie.
Thank you so much for having me, Kelly.
I just want to start because I love this story. And first, before we go any further, for our audience who are watching video, I want you to see right over Margie's shoulder is her beautiful mom. So that's a gorgeous picture.
Thank you.
So to start, your journey into kind of a midlife reinvention began with the Margie Project. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
So a year dedicated to trying something new each month with friends. To start and take us back to what inspired you to create that, and what did you discover about hope and possibility during that pivotal year?
So it actually started when I was 49. And as many women can probably relate, the prospect of turning 50 was not very exciting for me. It was kind of a bummer. So I was feeling negative about it, and I said, no, I've got to turn this feeling around. So I was thinking, what can I do for my 50th birthday? It's a milestone birthday. We want to celebrate it, right? So people were saying, why not do a party? Why not do a trip? None of that appealed to me. And finally, I came upon the idea of a year of experiences, which a friend of mine named the Margie Project. And what it included was each month I would do a new experience with a friend. And those experiences ranged from learning to ride a motorcycle to having a high tea with some friends to zip lining and everything in between.
I love it.
Yeah, it was fun.
How did that feel for you that each month you just made that decision? That must have been incredibly empowering.
It really was. I didn't realize how much until years later. Now I'm 58. So, that was 8 years ago. So I've realized all the things I got out of it. And some of those things I didn't realize at the time, of course. I thought what I was doing was just kind of having some fun. But what I didn't realize was how much they changed my life. So, for instance, you mentioned the fact that I did triathlons. Well, one of my experiences that I wanted to do during my 50th year was actually just to run a 5K, because I had always worn this badge, invisible badge that said, I am not a runner. And I just wanted to run a 5K. So I tapped a friend of mine who was very athletic and definitely was a runner to help me run a 5K. And then from that, I learned that she had started doing triathlons, which include running, biking, and swimming. And she said, listen, now that you can run, I know you can bike, I know you can swim, why not do triathlons? So that became a part of my life. So that health journey, that, became the start of a massive health and fitness journey that continues to this day. So that's just one example of how it really did change my life.
That's so beautiful. And thank you for talking about it. I mean, I find that so inspiring. Yeah, it is. And I'm sure that, emotionally, that probably prepared you for what you've gone on to do. So losing your mother, and correct me if I'm wrong, her name was Rona?
Rona Zable, yes. Mm-hmm.
So that must have been an incredible turning point for you when you lost her, both personally and, just your whole life, it's your mom. I remember losing my own mother, and it's hard to describe how that feels. The person who gave you that unconditional love. So, how does your experience of grief and the promise, talk to us about the promise you made to her to finish her novel? How did that help you heal and transform your understanding of resilience?
Okay, so first, let me just quickly give a little background. My mother was a published author of 4 award-winning young adult novels years ago, about 35 years ago, actually. And they were published by major New York publishers. During that time, she also worked as the editor of a newsletter she founded, which was called Senior Scope. It was a monthly newspaper, actually, for senior citizens in the southeastern Massachusetts area where she lived. So she was always a writer and an author. But when she retired and moved to Florida, this was about, well, now it's definitely over 20 years ago, she started writing an adult novel. And that novel obviously was very different than her young adult novels, but it was based on a lot of the life she experienced and saw living in South Florida when she moved down here. We were already here at the time. So she wrote it literally for almost 20 years. And then she got sick very, very quickly. And before she passed away from pancreatic cancer, which was February 2023, I told her that I wanted to publish that book. I promised her I would publish it. But because she had been published by these major New York City publishers, she didn't want me to self-publish it, which would have been much easier. She said, only if you can find a publisher could I publish it. And I said, okay, I'm sure I can do that, whatever. I just wanted to make her that promise, honor her. And when she passed away, I was obviously grieving. And just to explain a little more, she was a single parent. I was an only child. We were very, very close. So it was really, really shattering when she passed. And it was unexpected. Even though she was 87, we expect our loved ones to live forever. We hope that, right? But never does happen. But anyway, I was grieving and I found that I couldn't do my regular work. In my day-to-day life, I was a freelance writer, which was also something that came about from the Margie Project. At the time of the Margie Project, I was running my PR firm and I realized I was burnt out and then switched over to becoming a freelance writer. So anyway, I was a freelance writer, but I had never written fiction. But I figured, hey, I'm I'm a pretty good writer, even though it's nonfiction. I love to read fiction. How hard could it be? So I took a look through everything she wrote, and I realized it needed some work, but I didn't know what I needed to fix. So I decided to take time off from my regular freelance work and learn the craft of fiction. And by doing that, I had to listen to podcasts. I did a lot of research, and I actually hired what's called a developmental editor, who is someone that actually looks at the whole novel and lets you know major things that need to be fixed. So ultimately, after all that, I ended up spending 3 months. I added 20,000 words, new characters, a romance, and a tighter storyline. And of course, a lot of that writing happened through tears, because not only was I writing my mom's book, or working on it, but I was also reading what she had written. And a lot of it was so beautiful and had so many memories attached to it. So grief was really ever present. But during that time, and afterwards, I really feel like it was a gift from my mother, because I don't know what I would have done with myself without having a project. My mother knew that, I knew that, and I kind of felt like she was there with me, maybe across another world. Sometimes I felt she was in my head, sometimes I felt her around me, but I really feel like she was a part of the process, and it also helped me infuse a lot more of the themes of, resiliency, understanding more of the emotional core, putting more of that in, friendship, and starting later in life. It was all part of the experience. So I actually think that helped the journey.
It must have at times felt like a beautiful walk with your mother, because writing is truly intimate, whether it be fiction or nonfiction. Uh, the very essence of who you are as a person comes out on the page,
Yes.
and is reflected. So it must have been just a beautiful journey with her.
It was a beautiful journey, and there was a lot of crying involved.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and I still do, sometimes I'm writing and I'm crying at the same time. I'm like, oh my God, and I'll say to mom, listen, I have to be somewhere in an hour. Can we take this down a notch? Because I'm always talking to her and asking her for help. That's something else I learned, so sometimes I need to take a break. But yeah, I mean, it is a beautiful experience.
Hmm. Listen, I cry when I write too, Margie. We're both members of that club, proud card holders of the Crying While Writing Club.
Great to be a member.
So tell me about the book. Tell me about the what readers will find in your book.
Well, readers can find, the Cabernet Club is really a friendship story. It starts with the main character, Debbie Gordon, who finally decides to live the life of her dreams, moving from New England to Florida. But she has a timeline, because her daughter has finally moved away to Delaware, of all places, and wants her mother to move in with her. But Debbie has always lived in New England and finally can retire and wants to live somewhere warm. So she and her daughter agree on a 6-month timeline, which is explained more in the book. So if Debbie, the character, basically doesn't get a life in 6 months, doesn't find her happiness in Florida, then she will move to Delaware to basically be her daughter's unpaid nanny, living with her and her family. So, Debbie starts off very excited. She's going to do this, no problem. This is a no-brainer. But she ends up finding, when she moves to her place, that it's not what she expected. It's kind of shabby and crummy, this condo place she moves to. And she had in her mind, even though she's on a tight budget, that she would kind of be like a golden girl, living like the golden girls, having all these friends and going out and all being very exciting. But she ends up in this place called Palmetto Point that's pretty crummy, and so is her place. That they featured a fake picture of what her place looked like. So she's kind of down on everything. But luckily, early on, she ends up meeting two friends, Maria and Fran, and they end up forming the Cabernet Club, which is also explained in the book. So luckily, she has some friends who have already lived in Palmetto Point to help guide her and help her on her journey. Because remember, to get a life, she has to go through a lot. And in this case, she has a lot of things to deal with. She ends up having a medical mystery, a nemesis from her past shows up. She deals with all kinds of crazy characters, where she lives, dating, money problems, all kinds of things that really threaten her whole happy existence in Florida. So ultimately, it's about her journey in helping her friends helping her, and helping each other actually live their best lives, really, as you get older. So the motto she comes up with a motto for the Cabernet Club, which is, why can't the rest of our lives be the best of our lives? Because really, yeah, a lot of times, and this ties into the Margie Project as well. A lot of times we hit, say, the age of 50, and we say, that's it. It's all downhill from here, right? And sadly, a lot of popular culture tells us the same thing. But in reality, with all the advances in medicine and lifestyle, and how we're living better and better and longer, that's absolutely not true. Sometimes, because we've checked all the boxes, by the time we've lived to 50, we might have done the right thing with our jobs or our family or our kids. Sometimes everything opens up after 50. And that's what mom lived it, I'm living it. And we wanted to show that in a book, that even if you are on a budget, and even if you're older and you have health issues, medical, money issues, whatever, you can still have a wonderful life.
As someone who is over the age of 50 as well, I love this concept and I love the messaging, because you're right. I mean, it does. When you turn 50, you can go on Amazon right now and get all the over the hill birthday party stuff, right?
Yes.
And that's just not the case. It's not. Because, and I think too, as a, just as a culture, that we have gotten away from the fact, like if you look around the world,
Yes.
We are seasoned, and we have wisdom from our time here. Yes. And I think that is sometimes discounted. So this read must be incredibly empowering for women like me, who are of a certain age, and see this as kind of the point in life where we awaken and we feel brave enough to be honest about our life.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So you are a leader in several communities. I'm just going to jump to this from it, because one is the 50-Year-Old Mermaid Facebook group. Mm-hmm. Am I correct in saying that? Tell me about that, because it sounds fabulous.
Yeah, around the same time as the Margie Project, I decided to start a Facebook group with the same concept. Our lives are getting better. They're just going to go up after age 50. And I associate with mermaids, and over the years, gosh, I have so many things I've collected around mermaids, but there's some negative and some positive things around mermaids. But the positive thing I would take from it, and the reason why I called it the 50-Year-Old Mermaid, is because, and it's 50-year-old and over mermaids, obviously. But the way I see mermaids is they are basically fun, flexible, free. I like alliteration, so those F words are fun for me. Yeah, basically, willing to consider all different things, not being stuck in the old paradigms in thoughts that we had, and really wanting to learn, experience, and grow after age 50.
I mean, it truly helps people navigate those midlife transitions. You're giving people permission to be free, to be who they are.
Yes.
Yeah. And in your freelance writing, you also, because in the bio, I know we talked about, I mean, you've been published in some amazing areas, the New York Times, AARP, Fortune. You write about topics about aging and retirement and health and financial wellness.
Yes.
So how do your professional insights intersect with your personal mission to empower hope and resilience in women over 50?
Yeah, in so many ways, in every day, it keeps happening more and more. So, a couple of different ways. First of all, I find out through my day-to-day work writing, nonfiction helpful articles. I find out so much good information, and I like to put in little Easter eggs, surprising things in my novel. And I'm working on the second novel, so this is where you'll see a lot of it too, which we'll talk about later, hopefully. Little Easter eggs of information that will help people. Like today, this is so funny. This morning, I get the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, and I'm always reading stuff that's helpful. And also, I write for a publication called Provoked Magazine. And um, one of the people wrote about something called time banking, which I had never heard of. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's basically where in your community you can set up these time banks that are almost like the old barter system. So basically, you provide an hour of whatever, dog sitting, babysitting, meal prep, whatever, and it goes in this little time bank in your community. And once you give that hour, you can get an hour of something else available in your community. And I'm on a lot of retiring groups and all that kind of stuff too for what I do. And I'm like, that's such a great idea, especially for retired people on a budget, to be able to find that info. And I'm like, I made a note and I said, I'm going to find a way to put this in the novel because my mom and I were all about informing and educating. So even though this book is fiction, I love throwing in little tips that can help people, and so did she. So that's something we believe together. But all that stuff that I learned, and I really, it's all part of the flow. So I write 1,000 words a day, and that's how I write my novel. But um, that's in the morning. Then in the afternoon, I'm writing my regular, financial wellness, health, lifestyle, whatever stuff. So all that stuff is still hanging around my brain, and it all shapes the work. So it's very much of a synthesis of that information for both the fiction and nonfiction.
I love that because, you know, when you're reading a fiction book, you're doing that for pleasure. But to be able to take away nuggets of wisdom from that as well. And I mean, that makes the writing more realistic because you're talking about real world, solutions, but also real world problems that people encounter on
Yes.
their journey. I think because we've all read books where it's not realistic. You read the book and you're thinking, yeah, but that doesn't happen as easy as they're making it out to be. There's some bumps in the road, we know.
Yes.
So I love the fact that you're putting those things in there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so you said you wanted to cover some more things about the book. So tell me more. Tell me more about your process. Um, Tell me more about your mom. I want to learn all of it.
Sure. So, well, I'll talk about my mom first. She was amazing. She, again, I said, she divorced my father when I was one, and she had a, very tough financial life, a rough childhood, but she is truly the most amazing, um, irreplaceable person I know. She was the most optimistic, even with all the stuff that life threw her, person I've ever met. And she achieved a lot. So, to be able to do something related to her and honor her is really important to me. So, to tie that in, when I finished the book and published it, got it published, everyone thought, and I thought, that it would be a one and done project because I had specifically said this was to honor my mom. I had never done it before. It wasn't in my future plan to become a novelist. Sometimes I call myself the accidental novelist for that reason. Because I like to play with words, right? So yeah. But yeah, I thought it was one and done, but an interesting thing happened when I finished, and that was that I really fell in love with the characters. And once I did that, my brain started working, and I started thinking, we didn't get to learn a lot about the characters in book one because it was mostly about the main character's journey. But the characters are interesting, and I've since gotten plenty of feedback that people really love them and they wanted to know more, and so did I. And so, as my mind's whirling around thinking of all the possibilities, I said, you know what? I need to write a new book. And in fact, I know two books I can do from this that would be really good. So, I had a 3-book series in mind. And there's a bigger story around this, but to make a long story short, another writer friend had launched a publishing house a little bit after my initial small publisher. So she loved book one, The Cabernet Club. And again, to make a long story short, she is actually taking on all 3 books in the series, and we're republishing The Cabernet Club next year, along with book 2, and then book 3 the year after. So there'll be a little bit different cover and sort of a marketing and launch thing around it. But I'm actively writing book 2 now. I'm about 60% done with that.
Hey guys, Kelly here. I wanted to jump in and let you know that you can find out more about my work by visiting my website at kellybuckley.com, or you can find my books on Amazon. Okay, back to the episode.
It's such a process to write a book. It is.
It is.
You feel like you're pouring a piece of yourself out into the written word, but it's scary, and you have to be open to criticism, and there's so many things that come with putting yourself out there, not just writing, but in any project. And to do that after the age of 50, how did that feel for you?
I think it just validates how I feel and how many women feel that, yeah, there's no reason you can't. And by the way, I was a finance major and an MBA, and I was always in the business world. And I didn't feel like I could become a writer, even though my mother always thought I should be one, so did everyone else, until after 50, because I didn't feel like I had enough experience. That was my own personal feeling. So to take that all together, I think being over 50 is the best time to be a writer, to put yourself out there, to do creative stuff, because you're drawing from such a wealth of experience, life experience, that there's no other way you could get that. You can't just read it in a book or learn it some other way. Living it really helps energize and make creative projects, I think, so much better.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I always joke with my best friend about, in our 20s, we thought that we had it all figured out. In our 30s, we were like, whoa, we don't have it all figured out, but most of it. And then in our 40s, we were like, yeah, there's not a lot we have figured out. But then in our 50s, we were like, you know what? We figured out what we could with what we had at the time, and now we're going to do better. We're going to embrace who we are after all those decades. But it's so funny how your perspective changes over the decades.
Yes, so true.
Yeah. And I think that is something that we don't celebrate enough. We don't celebrate that.
We don't celebrate it and we don't talk about it enough, because the thing is, you can't just say it once. You can't just say it twice. We get stuck falling into, the old patterns of, oh, I'm tired. I don't feel good. I'm over 50. I should be taking it easy. We have to constantly remind ourselves and be reminded that that's not true. It's like, snap out of it. Not true. Let's change the narrative to the real narrative. And that is, you can do whatever you want, even with those limitations. We're smarter. We're more resourceful after 50. We can figure out how to get it done.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about the response from that over 50 group to your book and your writings, and how is this being received?
Well, it really does make my heart sing. And I know it makes my mom's heart sing because, we talk to each other a lot. But yeah, I mean, so many people have told me that, yes, they love to hear, they want an optimistic story, because there are many negative stories, and a lot of sad stuff about older people. But, I have romance in there and things that people say, oh, that's never going to happen to me. And, how can you live on a budget? And what if you have a health problem? Can you still do things? And because the goal is to show, yes, you can overcome any of these challenges, I'm getting a lot of good feedback from women. And surprisingly, men over 50 are also some of my biggest fans, which blows my mind. But I think they love the humor. If
Yeah.
nothing, there's a lot of fun, funny stuff, because as I tell people, it's based in South Florida. And South Florida is truly stranger than fiction. So the fiction I write is so informed by truth. I couldn't even make up some of the crazy stuff that's actually true in there, but it's very funny. So I'm lucky to have that material too.
I love it when you're reading a book and you can have a big belly laugh or a snort here and there. I mean, I think because that is truly the human experience. And that's funny that you say that about South Florida. That's great. So looking ahead, you're working on book 2 now, and then book 3 to kind of round out that full character development.
Yes.
What else do you want to do?
Yes. So, well, the real dream that Mom and I always had was for the Cabernet Club to be made into a sitcom. So that's part of one of the things we're working on, with the publisher, agents, that kind of stuff. So, because we wanted it to be out there, we think it would be a perfect sitcom. And also, financially, books, unless they're mega bestsellers, aren't a way to necessarily provide you a solid retirement income, right? So, but a sitcom or a movie might. So really, that would be more important. But beyond that, I've done public speaking in my prior life. I've done it in this life. So I hope to do more of that ties together kind of what you were saying, the whole over 50 empowerment with creativity and friendship, and any ways I can speak on that, maybe a little comedy thrown in where I can do some speaking, and of course, continued writing nonfiction and fiction as well. So that's where I see it going.
So let's go back a little bit and talk about grief.
Yes.
Because truly, this book has been a labor of love for you.
Yes.
But you were also grieving.
Yes.
So talk to me about how you worked through your grief, and then how you translate that into your interactions with people who then read the book and meet you when you're public speaking. Do you include the lessons that you've learned in your public speaking from grief? Because I mean, when we're over 50, we have experienced one loss or another, for sure.
Yes, for sure. So, yeah, there's a lot around that. So I had never experienced grieving uh, such a close loved one until my mom passed. So it was a new experience for me, and it was unlike anything I had ever gone through. So I work from home. Even when I had my PR business. So for the last almost 25 years, I've been working from home. My husband's a teacher, so he's out most of the day. So I spend a lot of time alone. And as the years go by, probably more and more time alone now that we have, everything online and that kind of thing. So spending time alone when you're grieving is challenging. Sometimes you need to spend time alone, right? And sometimes it can be more difficult. So I made a choice to, continue my fitness, writing the book. I've been playing pickleball, so I get out and do that and my other fitness things. So that's really the way I did that. But I just decided that I wanted to focus on writing this book. So it almost became, I hate to say it, a distraction from my grief, because if I hadn't had the book, I'm not sure what I would have done with myself, because I wasn't really wanting to do my regular work. So I would have just been sitting there, I don't know, crying and clueless all the time. I needed something to distract myself and to focus on. So in this case, it basically got me through the first 4 months. It took me about a month after she passed to deal with, some of the estate stuff. But yeah, it really helped me put some parameters and some detail and definition to my days. So I would spend literally 10 to 12 hours a day writing. And there were many times when I couldn't sleep, or I woke up from sleep where I had an idea and I would get up and I would write and I'd put something down. So basically, I was in my head the whole time. My husband was very good about it, but I was not in the space to deal with anything other than the book. And just to correlate that, currently where I am in book 2, 60% through, I'm almost in a similar headspace because it becomes overwhelming. Like everything I do now has to do with like, how can it relate to the book? How can it relate to the book? But in this case, for book 1, it helped me kind of distract me from the grief. So in truth, I didn't do things like my hospice grief group until after the book was done, because I didn't have space for grief. So it kind of was a distraction. And then I let everything go. I kind of felt like, okay, I did something to honor mom, I kind of checked it off the list, and then I can do my normal grieving. So after that, for about 6 months, I did, grief groups and other things. And then I also had to look for publishers, but I had more time for that and went back to writing. So it was maybe a little bit more unusual than other people's things, but that's how grief played out.
Mm-hmm. I mean, grief doesn't move in a straight line.
No.
I think, and I'm so glad that we are moving beyond the point where people have an expectation that, 3 days leave is going to do the trick. When you lose a loved one, it's, and it's truly dependent on the relationship that you have with that person.
Yes.
The life events that happened, maybe knots you have to untangle. I mean, life can be messy, and so you have to expect that grief can go in different directions. Do you think that your mother knew exactly what her little girl needed when she passed, and she talked to you about finishing that book because she knew your heart so well, and she knew that would help get you through?
That's what I would like to think. That's what I tell myself. And I also know for a fact she was always, when I finally became a freelance writer, that was her happiest moment. You know, when I was in the New York Times, she's like, now you've arrived, which wasn't necessarily true, but to her it was true, right? She had always wanted me to be a writer and had always pushed and pushed. And I think she also realized, now that she's on the other side, that I believe when on the other side, what I've learned is that, you know, those people can help with anything. So I think she also fast tracked the whole idea of, okay, this is, you know, your book and you can do it. And then threw in the stuff like, yeah, and maybe ultimately there'll be some other books and maybe, you know, it'll be, in production and maybe you can do speaking, which she also loved when I did. So I think all of this stuff really, the wind beneath my wings sounds so trite, but really, I really feel that way with my mom, 100%.
Mhm. And I love that, you know, you're very open about saying that you talk to your mom. Because I talk to my loved ones who have passed as well. I think it's a beautiful exercise, and I also believe that, you know, they are still with us, just in another form.
Me too.
Yeah. Um, you know, Margie, I just love what you are doing. What was it like for you to go to the grief group after you wrote the book?
It felt to me like I had permission to grieve. And that's my own stuff, right? Because I felt like, okay, I had done something to honor mom. And because, you know, I didn't know what to do. But then I could kind of put that aside and say, okay, now let's explore my own grief journey and, you know, learn from others and help each other. And, you know, we're still in contact. So, you know, and they were so supportive about the book and they, you know, they loved the same kind of story and whatever. So, I think I felt like I had permission.
Mm, that's so lovely. Um, are there any books or particular points of wisdom that you found helpful that you can share with our audience? I know that a big chunk of our audience is from the bereavement community, and they
Yeah.
have lost one person or another. Um, is there any wisdom you'd like to offer from your journey?
I would say hospice was incredible. My mother was in at-home hospice only for 5 days, but also their grief groups, amazing. All of that, you know, free or part of the system or whatever. I thought they were both so incredibly helpful. And also for me, I feel fortunate that I was able to do some of my nonfiction writing and incorporate things my mom had taught me. So she was really good at estate planning. So I wrote about that for Next Avenue, along with a few things that maybe could have been done differently. And that happened to be one of the top 10 articles, I think in 2024, top 10 most read articles, because I was able to give real life experience and say, here's what my mom did right, almost everything. And here's a few things that could have been done better. And, you know, we were able to help people. And I've done that in several things. I wrote about how, I wrote an essay on how my mom, I was never a cook, but after my mom passed, I pulled up one of her old recipe books that she had given me and decided to make some of those recipes. So these are, you know, the fact that I was able to write about my mom in other ways, write about her, made the grief so much better. So if there are any ways, you know, beyond writing to incorporate or honor our parents in our ongoing lives, I think that's really important.
Mhm. And you know, and congratulations on, you know, the success with your writing. But thank you for sharing things like estate planning, because that is such a complicated issue. My husband and I were caregivers for his parents, and there's so many things that you have to consider that people don't realize. And so when you have information, knowledge is power, and you're able to navigate those situations. And I always say to a lot of the guests that I chat with on the podcast that that is kind of our responsibility, I think, when we go through things and we learn that we share it with our neighbor. That's how we become better.
That's
Uh,
great. I love that.
yeah, and it's how we heal because somebody probably read that article who had a hellish experience with estate planning, and they read it and they were like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, but it connected them and said, okay, I wasn't the only person.
Right. And for other people, they're like, I've been meaning to do this. That's what they told me. I've had people say, I've been meaning to do it. And that was my wake up call. Okay, now I'm going to start doing it. And that's great too, however it plays out.
Yeah. Is there anything that you hoped I would ask you that I haven't? And if yes, what would that be? And what else would you like to discuss?
I would say this is great. Again, I've used this term often that for me, my grief was a gift because it led me to do something that I never was even on my radar screen. And now it's become something that will probably be part of my legacy. So I think thinking about grief and how people are in our lives can really open up a lot of possibilities. There's plenty of sadness. I think that's very clear. But looking at the opportunities that grief provides, I think is something that is important to do as well.
Mhm. I totally agree. I actually think grief can be a portal to, your own awakening, transforming your life. It gives us a perspective that only struggle can provide.
Yes.
And that's the life experience, right? It's
Hey.
sometimes, all the blue skies and the rainbows, that's not going to do the trick.
Doesn't.
But when we experience loss, it gives us an opportunity to look around and to say, what do I want to do differently? How will my relationships change because of what I've learned? I found that I softened significantly in a huge way. I became more emotional about things. Did you find that as well?
So funny you should say that. I've softened in some ways and I've toughened in other ways.
Interesting. In what way?
Well, this sounds mean, but I think I've become, I know, empathetic to people that I think really have issues, but I've gotten less tolerant, and this may be a failure on my part, less tolerant of the small stuff that I find is not really that big of a deal. So if people are complaining and I just about things that I think aren't really that important, I'm kind of like, not that big of a deal. Next. So I don't know, maybe grief sort of opened it up for me that said, listen, grief, losing someone's a big deal. But a lot of the stuff we're complaining about in life is not that big of a deal. So yeah, for me, it's been both ways.
Yeah. Well, and I think grief also teaches us when our heart is broken and so tender. I think it teaches us the importance of setting some boundaries
Yes.
in your life. And it's okay, especially for women. We struggle with that, right? To say yes to everybody, to be everything for everybody. But setting boundaries to protect your peace is perfectly fine.
Yes. So true. And boundaries about who you want to be with. I mean, my mother was my best friend. Not that I can compare every friend or relationship to her, but a little bit, and along the way, I've kind of I have had more boundaries around, that person doesn't really make me feel good. Or there were, this may have happened to you, there were a few people during my grieving that really said some negative things that I'm still not back to that same relationship with. So, yeah, it's changed a lot in terms of my relationships.
Yeah. I think boundaries are okay. I found, and I've talked about this before, early in my grief, those interactions with people who were complaining about this or that, I called it the rub because it felt like sandpaper on my skin.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I could not. I was like, no, I'm out. I'm gone.
Yes.
I couldn't do it. And I give them grace because they didn't experience what I experienced. So
Right.
they're not going to have that same perspective.
Yes.
But I did have to set those boundaries for myself as well. And I think that we need to give ourselves not only permission, but sometimes for women over 50, we have to give ourselves grace and say, you know what, I can't do it.
You're right. You're right. And I'm still working on the opposite of that too, because there are a few people that said things that I'm still not over. So that's something I'm working on. I probably need to give them grace too, but it's still upsetting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some people try very hard to say the right thing.
Yes. Yes.
I think that other people have not experienced a loss, so that they might think that what they're saying is going to be received in a different way.
Exactly.
But it is difficult when you are grieving and you hear something, you're like, what? That's it's hard because your heart is very tender.
Yes.
And we are, especially early in grief, I know that I was very hypersensitive
Definitely.
to what people said.
Same.
But I think that a good message for our listeners would be, if you don't know what to say, just show up, just give a hug, just say, you know what, I'm here for you. I don't know what to say about this because I'm so sorry and I haven't experienced this type of loss, but I am here for you. I just showed up with dinner for you. Let me run some errands for you because I know you're having a hard time getting out of bed, let alone go grocery shopping. I think it's a good opportunity for us to teach whoever may be listening out there. You don't have to have the right words. You don't have to have any of that. You just have to show up.
Perfect.
Yeah. Maybe that's your next article, Margie. Maybe write about that.
Well, I did write something similar, but I actually took on the wording and I wrote about what you should say or do for a grieving person for Success Magazine. Yes, because of that experience. I'm lucky. I feel lucky. Like anytime I have a bad experience, I can write about it and turn it around.
Yeah.
So, I'm very fortunate in that.
You really are. And you have, with your talent as a writer, you have this opportunity to change minds and share knowledge. If you wouldn't mind, I'm going to ask you to share that link for that article. I want to put it in the show notes because I think that it will be so helpful for our listeners. Yeah.
Definitely.
Margie, before we go, can you tell our listeners how they can find you and how they can find your work?
Yes. So I have a website. I don't know if you can see it from back there. It's margiezfisher.com. So I'll spell it out. It's Margie, Margie, the middle initial Z like Zable, Fisher, Fisher.com. And when you go there, you'll find a couple of things. You can learn all about the Cabernet Club and where to buy it. You can learn about me. You can learn about my other writing. And you can also get a free bonus chapter if you sign up for my list of the Cabernet Club, which is a fun one that my mom wrote.
Oh,
And it's called The Audition. It's about the Cabernet Club auditioning a potential member to be a part of the club. And it's super fun and funny. And you'll get that along with updates on my new book, all the events I do, all that kind of stuff. If you go to the website and sign up for my list, which is all on there. So that's all good stuff.
oh, I am going to sign up because I want to read that chapter. Well, I'm going to read the whole book, but I want to read that chapter. I think I'll make that on my list for today. Because Margie, I can see in your beautiful spirit. I'm sure that your mother is just beaming and smiling from ear to ear at you, and how you have taken a struggle and a loss and you've turned it into something so beautiful. So I want to get to know her a little better.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moms, right? They're the best.
The best.
Margie, thank you so, so much for coming on the podcast and just being so honest about your story. I really appreciate it. And I know so many of our listeners are going to be, they're going to get so much from it.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay. All right, you guys, take care. We will see you next time.
Thank you for joining me today on Broken Beautiful Me. I hope you found today's episode inspiring and insightful. Remember, every scar tells a story, and every story has the power to heal. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. Your support means the world to me, and it helps spread the message of hope and resilience to more people like us. Don't forget to leave a review and share this podcast with your friends and family. Together, we can create a community of strength and beauty in our brokenness. Until next time, stay strong, stay beautiful, and keep shining.